The Samaritans and the Jews did not get along. When the woman asked about worshiping, when she said, "Our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you say the place where people should worship is in Jerusalem," she says that the Samaritans worshiped, past tense, on this mountain. That's because the Jews had demolished their temple. There had been clashes before, so that's why she was so surprised that Jesus, this Jewish man, is speaking to her. I'm sure this conversation could not have happened if the disciples had been there. The disciples were worried about appearances and customs and feuds and dinner. Jesus saw a child of God and asked her for a drink. And he was honest with her in their conversations. The woman at the well is there at the middle of the day to avoid judgment of the other women. If she had been accepted in society, she would have gone to the well with all the other women, and they would have spent the day talking and laughing and connecting. Instead, we learn that she's had 5 husbands, and the man she's now with is not her husband. In this day, that sounds like a judgment on her. But in that day, a woman didn't have the option of leaving her husband. Only the husband could leave the wife. She also did not have a say in who she married or when. So the fact that she had had 5 husbands and the man she was with now was not her husband, it spoke to the way that she had been treated and to the things that had happened in her life, not the choices that she had made. But she was the one that was looked down upon and shunned, I'm sure in her day and also today. Drawing water in the heat of the day makes it look like she was doing her best to stay out of people's way, to avoid their judgment. I can't imagine how hard the judgment must have been for her to choose to walk to the well alone in the middle of the day. And then she gets there and this man, alone, a Jew, talks to her as if it's normal. In one of the commentaries that I read, they refer to her as the first missionary. She went and told of her encounter with Jesus. Sometimes missionaries go far away, and sometimes they tell the joy of their encounter with Christ in their own hometowns. That is good news in the middle of a pandemic. I noticed that these are the same people that it looked like she was avoiding. But this good news was too good not to share. And perhaps she was a little proud of the fact that he had talked to her. I love that she didn't cower or silently give him a drink. She engages with him. She isn't afraid to ask hard questions when encountering someone who has more power than she does. She even seems a little snarky. You have no bucket, and the well is deep. I love that. And Jesus engages with her without judging or being condescending. He's honest with her. I think there's only one other time in the gospel that he says, yes, I am the Messiah. Later in the story, when Jesus speaks of those who sow and of those who reap, he's talking about evangelism. The people of Sychar, on their way to see Jesus, are the fields that are ready for harvest when he's talking to the disciples. Perhaps the disciples will reap what the Samaritan woman has sown among the townspeople on their way to meet Jesus. The disciples will tell them more and help them in their relationship with Jesus. In these days that we are living in, it feels like every day I become more aware of just another layer of the racism and injustice that is so ingrained in our systems. And I am overwhelmed at how much work there is to do. Some days I'm just frozen. And I know that it is a privilege to be able to choose to do the work or walk away. And I know how important it is for all of us to begin to do the work. But I also need to pace myself, and so do you, knowing that some days you'll be sowing, and some days you'll be reaping, and some days we need to take a Sabbath. I need to say that again to myself and probably to you. In the work that we are doing these days, in the trauma that we are living through, in pandemic, in separation, in protesting for equal rights for all of us, in saying the names of our Black brothers and sisters that have lost their lives. In all of this work, it is exhausting and it is important. And we are only a piece of it, but that doesn't dismiss our responsibility to stand up and work for it. But some days, we need a Sabbath. We need to remember to rest in these days. I was struck yesterday at realizing how tired I was, how hard the day was. And then I thought, in thinking through this scripture, why was Jesus at the well in the first place? Because he was tired and he stopped to rest. And he asked someone for help, give me a drink. We skip that part. But in these days, as I weep in exhaustion after doing so much and not getting very much of my list checked off again, I'm going to read that verse over. Jesus, tired from his journey, was sitting beside the well while the disciples went to get food, while some sowed and others reaped. There is work to do, and a lot of it is our responsibility to do and to undo a lot of the damage that has been done to so many. But we also have to rest. This week, so many in our larger church are gathering from their living rooms all across the country and several other countries to do the work of the larger church of our PCUSA through the General Assembly. Our own pastor, Emil, is a delegate this year. They've been praying and Zooming, reading and voting on some pretty important work that has been happening for years, work that will continue as we keep listening to the Spirit speak and move among us, work that some of us are just beginning and some of us are decades into. Until yesterday, the sowing and the reaping in this story felt like keeping score. But in sitting with this scripture on days of great energy and on days of anxiety and weariness, I'm beginning to see the strength and the faith and the peace of being part of a group of sowers and reapers, part of this huge cloud of witnesses. Some days we will reap what others have been laboring at for years, and some things we will sow without seeing them to fruition. And some days we need to take a Sabbath, y'all. It takes all of it. I'm so glad we're in this together. Let's get to work. And when you need it, take a break.